Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cutler, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
To those present here, and as well as those listening in live, if you are listening to our live stream, and thank you to Amnon Nissan from Nissan Communications for making that possible. If you are listening in, we would love to hear from you. If you could enter your name in the chat box, ask questions, we'd love to hear your input. It really makes us feel that we're studying Torah across the entire world. And in fact, that is going to be one of the themes of today's class. We're going to take two stories, both amongst the most famous Jewish stories. One of them is what we're reading about in the Torah portion, and that is Joseph and his brothers. One of the best known stories, made a Broadway play out of it, right? Anyone watch that? No?
What was it?
Joseph and his brothers. Joseph and the many... There we go. So that's a famous story. The second famous story is the Hanukkah story. What we're going to do is somehow connect both in one message and give a new spin on both. So that's what we're attempting to do in this 45-minute class. A new spin on both stories, show how there's a connection between the two, and what I like about it is two well-known stories, but I think you'll leave with a new appreciation of both. Hanukkah again starts Sunday night. This Sunday night is candle number 1. Okay.
Now, can I ask real quick? Now, we light no, it's next Saturday. But
next Sunday
night.
Sunday,
when you have a choice of the Shabbat candle and the Hanukkah.
So that is the
candle.
following Friday night. You have 2 candles to light. And on Friday, first you do Hanukkah, then you do...
Because once Shabbat starts...
We don't light other candles.
Okay. Oh,
so first comes
okay.
Shabbat.
That's the easy way to remember.
That's the easy way to remember.
What you probably referred to is the law, and this is in the Talmud, if you only have enough money for one set of candles, which one do you buy? Yes, that is a real question in the Talmud. In the old days, that shows the poverty. We can't even imagine what that would be like. Imagine that question. The house is bare. There's nothing to buy. The Talmud says you stick with Shabbat candles.
Okay.
Interesting.
Oh, I like that.
So you light first the Hanukkah candles, then Shabbat candles. So we're going to talk today about both stories, but by introducing a very famous debate that has really been through Judaism for thousands of years. And we're going to say that began already, Joseph, Hanukkah. And it's a debate, and Jews always debate. Talmud is full of debates. Start off with a joke. So Abe comes to his rabbi and says, Rabbi, I want you to teach me Talmud. He says, are you sure? He says, yes. All right, you got to answer this question for me first. There's 2 men that go down a chimney, and they come out, and one is dirty, and one is not. Who takes a bath? So Abe says, simple enough. The fellow who's dirty takes a bath. The other guy does not. He says, no, you got it all wrong. The fellow who is dirty sees the other guy who's clean, and he assumes he's clean as well, so he doesn't take a bath. And the guy who's clean looks at the other guy who's dirty, and assumes he's dirty as well, he takes a bath. All right, 0 for 1. Let's try another one. 2 guys go down a chimney. One guy is dirty and one guy's not. Who takes a bath? So Abe says, well, you just told me this. Same question. The fellow who's clean takes a bath. Says, no. Each looks at themselves. And the guy who's clean does not take a bath, and the guy who's dirty does take a bath. Just want to see if that's someone for the class. Do you want to just open the door?
Yeah, there were
in
people
case.
out there, which is why.
So I want to see whether or not they might be here for the class. Come on in. No. So then he says, all right, you're 0 for 2. Now I'm going to ask you a third question. All right, give it to me. 2 people come down a chimney, and one is dirty and one is not. Who takes a bath? And now Abe's already smart by this time. He says, well, depends on whose perspective. He says, no, that can't be true. How could it be possible for 2 people to go down a chimney and only one is dirty? Of course, they're both dirty. This time Abe is really frustrated. Rabbi, you've given me 3 different answers for the same question. He goes, now you can learn Talmud. Okay, and Deb, you want to, Tammy, sit here.
That's all right. Judy's coming too.
Okay.
So she'll join.
Okay. So, Jews always debate, and the Talmud is full of them. We're going to discuss a Hanukkah debate as well as a Joseph debate. But I want to start with the Midrash, text 1, and this is on page
170.
170. And
Oh, 170.
we're familiar with the Hanukkah story and what the Greeks wanted to do and outlawed many Jewish practices. When we say Greeks, by the way, it's the Syrian Greeks. Just the history is interesting. Alexander the Great was actually a friend of the Jews. He did not mind. There was a story in the Talmud how that came to be. They had a good relationship, so much so that when he was conquering much of the world and he let the Jews do their thing and didn't take over Jerusalem, Jews were so appreciative that they said, we're going to start naming our kids Alex. And that became a Jewish name. So if you're wondering how there are till today many Jewish Alexes, Alexandras, it became almost a Jewish name at that time.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's after he died. From what I understand, the civilization didn't have one leader anymore. There were different groups amongst them. One of which was the Syrian Greeks. That was the Greeks that were over that region. It was after he died, and a few generations later, where this King Antiochus was horrific and horrible to the Jewish people. But that was after Alexander the Great's kingdom got broken into different ones. So I guess there were different regions of Europe and Asia that he was controlling, and this was the Syrian Greeks. So this fellow outlawed many Jewish practices, and Shabbat, and kosher, and circumcision, amongst others. And when the Talmud discusses Hanukkah, again, it's discussing it shortly after the story happened. You know, it's not like they're discussing the Exodus. The Talmud's being written just a few centuries after it happened. So it'd be like us discussing Revolutionary War or something like that. It's just interesting to know. Like it was fairly recent. Hanukkah is the most, I mean, it's even more recent than Purim is. Just Purim happened between the first and second temple when the Jews were living in Persia. Then the Jews are allowed to go back into Israel. At the beginning, who allowed the Jews to go back into Israel? It was the Persians. Persians are defeated by the Greeks. That was when the story of Hanukkah happened. Also interesting to note is that entire time in the Second Commonwealth, when the Jews were in Israel, they did not really have their own country. They were under Persian rule or under Greek rule. There was only a short amount of time that they were under their own domain, and that was after the story of Hanukkah. That was when the Jews became their own people in the Second Temple. It didn't last long. There was a fight amongst the Maccabee children, who would be the next leader. There was infighting, and they asked Rome to intervene. And from that time and on, Jews were under Roman rule. But that's just the history. So what's even neat about the Hanukkah story is it's like it matches up with history. You know, it's not that ancient in any event. So when the Midrash discusses all the things that the Greeks did to the Jews, it says that the Greeks wanted the Jews to abandon their faith in the Jewish God, be more universal people. But it words it in a very unique, odd manner. How? Look at the way the Midrash writes in Bereshit Rabbah, text 1.
The exile of the Greeks darkened the eyes of the Jews with their decrees. They decreed right on the horn of the ox that you have no share in the God of Israel.
Oh. So I understand that they didn't want them to do mitzvot. Right on the ox of on the horn of an ox? What's the poor ox? How did that come into the picture? Is it an odd way? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it sounds like a shofar. I wasn't even that's interesting. Right on what you usually use as the shofar that you do not have. That's interesting. We could go home right now, Tammy. We have our answer.
Yeah.
We have our answer. Okay. So we're going to come back to perhaps one of the mystical meanings of why the ox was chosen as the metaphor here for where they should write. They have, what they wanted them to write is, I want you to sign your name that you are no longer a unique people that has a relationship with the Jewish God. You are universalists. You are people of the world. Okay. Before we get into this, now we're going to dive into this week's Torah portion, Joseph and his brothers. Okay, it's a hard story because as much as we can just say, oh, they were jealous and they wanted to kill him, and it's true, but these were individuals that at the end of the day, we all come from, Jewish people come from the 12 tribes. We consider the 12 tribes to be righteous individuals. And yes, they had this time where we're not whitewashing what they did. It was a sin. It was a problem. It was wrong. The Torah doesn't. But at the same time, they were considered righteous individuals who messed up tremendously. So it is important to try to find, not to justify what they did, but how could it be that they made such a mistake? Okay, I'm not justifying what they did. They did something wrong, and they had to do teshuvah. It's one of the tremendous sins of the Torah. It's still very surprising. I mean, most of us never sold our sibling into slavery. Or at least I had. At least I didn't. What?
Many of us have been insulted.
Yeah.
They were somewhat justified in doing it because Joseph spoke Lashon Hara against his brothers, and the brothers had the chance to judge him, and they found him guilty, and this was a punishment for him having spoken against his
Right, but
own brothers.
that is true. But if our brothers were to gossip, and it's true, the Torah says that Joseph gossiped against his brothers. He was a tattletale. He saw things. He judged them. He saw things, and without investigating into the story, he came home. He said the brothers were committing adultery. The brothers were. He said a whole lot of libels against his brothers. That's true.
So it wasn't just a matter of being jealous.
Sure,
They didn't
sure.
just decide, oh, we don't like him, we're jealous, we're going to throw him in the pit. No, there was a lot of things that went on here
Correct.
that that you have to kind of like.
But why this? Could they not have dealt with it in any other way? That's.
Yeah, they could have.
Okay. So the story is that they said a lot of libels against him. He taunted them. He kept on telling them about dreams that one day he would be the ruler. We're not going to do all those verses today. The moment comes where they're shepherding their sheep. Jacob sends Joseph to go check out how they're doing. We mentioned in last week's class, he wanted to find out how they were doing. He didn't want to leave them alone. And at the moment when Joseph got closer, the two brothers who were considered the strong, mighty ones, who acted on impulse more than the others, who are
Levi and Shimon.
Shimon and Levi, they say, let's kill him right away. Their older brother, more level-headed, Reuven, says, let's not do that. We've had classes in previous years that discuss how Reuven meant well. He actually wanted to save Joseph. He just didn't have the courage to do so. We're not going to do that today. And at a certain point in time, they throw him into the pit. At that time, Judah turns to his brothers, Yehudah. Text 2. Barbara, and read.
And Judah said to his brothers, what profit is there if we slay our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, but our hand shall not be upon him, for he is our brother, our flesh. And his brothers hearkened.
Okay. That's the motive. Come on. If we kill him, we're not going to make any money. That's a shocking text. What profit are we going to have by killing him? Let's at least try to earn a few bucks from this one, right? Once we're going through this bother, I know the whole story is shocking, yeah.
This sounds to me like a variation on Reuben, where Judah is trying to find a way out in the midst of his somewhat bloodthirsty brothers.
Interesting. Okay, so he's trying to do anything he can to convince them not to kill him, and money talk. So you're right. This way, we'll get something, and that might be a simple reading to
Well,
it. I think so. That is a conventional way of understanding it. He did not want to take a stand against 10 brothers. Benjamin's young; he's at home. 10 other brothers, or 9 because Reuben's not present.
And there's one other thought too that might be slightly more charitable, is if the brothers thought they had kind of backed themselves into a corner, he's also providing them a way out.
Okay. Oh, I see. Because they already threw him into a pit and were threatened to kill him. They have two choices at this point. Either they kill him or they let him go, and then he runs home and he snitches, and then they're...
Right.
So this is a way where they don't have to shed blood.
How many
Okay.
brothers do you have, Brian?
Yeah.
And Reuven and Judah knew that what their brothers were capable of, because the incident with Dinah had already happened.
Correct.
And both Shimon and Levi murdered the whole town. So they knew what they knew
Right,
what
right,
he
right.
was- they would, what those two guys were capable of. So they wanted to intercede without getting killed themselves, probably.
Those
Sure.
bar mitzvah boys.
I'm telling you. Yeah. Those young lads, what Jewish young lads are capable of. At least today they're.
Because one of them was 13.
Correct, correct. It just seems so callous, this verse. Now, like, what profit are we going to have?
Well-
What that does, that was Judah who said it, what it
Correct.
does to the nations looking at us that think that we're, we're money
Correct.
hungry.
So that's what we're, yeah. Any other thoughts?
Just that the common consciousness was at a different level then than it is even today.
I know, and it seems so. And what's surprising is if we're discussing a Yishmael or an Esav, it's one thing. The problem here is that these are the 12 tribes. And it quotes now from Psalms. They're all called Shiftei Yah Edus L'Yisrael L'Shem Adonai. It's a verse in Psalms where they're called the tribes of God. All 12 are called the tribes of God. So what makes this story different than other stories is that these are the Jewish tribes. Was there a thought? Any thoughts, Amnon? I hear some.
Yes,
Hello?
I wrote it down.
We hear
the
you loud
prophet-
and clear, Debbie.
Okay, profit could be implication of, reward and punishment. Did we do any discussion of that fact? But the reward would be in the future, the only reward in heaven. So it could be a spiritual profit rather than an earthly profit. And what happens, they are told in Ten Commandments, do not kill. And
Right.
so I'm curious where they learned to be so violent in their nature anyway.
Yeah, and the word profit there doesn't say what money, profit. So could there be another meaning in benefit? So that's where we're going to get to right now.
Touch the cup on the right or the left.
The left.
Rabbi,
Yes.
is the Ishmaelites, are those the Muslims?
They are the ancestor of the Muslims, correct. Yishmael is associated with the Muslims, Arabs. Absolutely, yeah. So to understand this, we need to say that there's more here that's going on than just a fight between the two, about jealousy. Keep in mind that up until this story, each one of the matriarchs and patriarchs had various children. Some were righteous, some were not. Okay? You had an Isaac, but then you had a Yishmael. Okay? Yishmael caused a lot of problems. There was a lot of drama back and forth. The course of history was changed as a result of Yishmael. We have another generation afterwards. We have a Jacob and we have an Esau. There was a lot of drama, a lot of problems. The brothers, saw this as the next generation of problems. They saw Joseph as someone who was going against the Jewish tradition. They saw Joseph as someone who was going to cause problems. And they saw, you know what? Let's deal with this in a different way than our parents, than our grandparents' generation. Let's totally. Now, what in particular was the problem? Yeah, Judy.
Well, those four boys were Leah's sons.
Yes.
And Leah was the undesired wife.
Correct. So
So in their heart of hearts, I think they really wanted to eliminate the children of Rachel because of the embarrassment or the humiliation or the sadness that their mother felt.
right. That this was a continuation of what happened with their mother. Yeah. There's a lot of ways to read this story.
So,
What we're going to say here, and I just because
Well, what I want to know is evidently there was not that prohibition against murder.
Oh yes, there was. The Bible's clear on that, even
I mean-
pre-Sinai.
Okay, well, see, then
So
how
what-
do they get away with being great people when they're
Well,
just
that's really
murderers?
our question here is not to justify what they did. It was wrong. It was a sin. However, they weren't just bloodthirsty. They had an intention that was wrong, but there was something to it. That's what we're trying to say here. That it wasn't just, there's more to the story. They had to learn their lesson. They had to learn why they were wrong. But it was not just simplistic jealousy or simplistic, bloodthirstiness. There's something more over here. And that is that they saw Joseph as someone outside this tradition, similar to a Yishmael, similar to an Esau. Now, however, there was something unique, Jewish mysticism says, about the difference between Joseph and the rest of his brothers. And in not just the rest of his brothers, but in particular between Joseph and which brother? The one who said, what prophet will there be? Judah.
Judah.
Because there's a few texts right now that really show that if you had to show two brothers at odds, it would actually be Joseph and Judah. Because after this whole story, they sell Joseph, right? After the story, they sell Joseph. The very next story is a story about Judah, an odd story where he has a relationship with a prostitute. The whole story is not important to right now. But if you look in text 4, it says, why was this section placed here? To teach us that after this story, Judah's brothers distanced themselves from him. You told us to sell him. Had you told us to return him, we would have obeyed you. So they were upset at Judah for doing this. And that is why a little bit later on in the story, when the whole thing happens, and they go down to Egypt, and Joseph makes their life crazy. I'm just paraphrasing the story. Who is the one that takes responsibility, that wants to fix up the story? It is Judah. Look in text 5. Text 5, when Joseph holds one of the brothers, Shimon actually, captive, Judah says to his father, Pam?
Text 5.
5, yes.
And Judah said to Israel his father, send the lad with me, and we will get up and go, and we will live and not die, both we and you, and also our young children.
Right.
I'll guarantee him, from my hand you can demand him. If I do not bring him to you and stand him up before you, I'll have sinned against you forever.
So later on, Judah is the one that takes the stand to, we got to resolve this issue. And then furthermore, and I'm just going through the story very briefly, when there's the final showdown between Joseph and his brothers, who's the one that stands up again? It's Judah. It's Judah. So Judah's the one that sells him into slavery, but Judah's also the one that tries to remedy the problem a little bit later on, takes responsibility for the young lad. Text 6 is the final showdown between Judah and Joseph. This showdown between Judah and Joseph began here, but what this idea in Jewish mysticism says is, this is an age-old debate in Judaism. What was the big difference? Well, there's another difference as well. Eventually they come into Israel, and the traveling sanctuary that the Jews had up until that point, and it kept on traveling in different locations, it was actually housed at a certain place called Shiloh. I don't even know where Shiloh is in Israel. Where is Shiloh? But I don't know if you know this, but the traveling sanctuary that went around the whole desert, they came into Israel. They didn't build a fixed temple for centuries. Where was the sanctuary until that point? It was in place A, B, C within Israel. Most of them, however, were in the portion of Joseph, including this place called Shiloh, where the portable sanctuary rested for 369 years. That's a long time. Only after that did they build the temple in where? Jerusalem, which was in the portion of Judah. Okay.
So the Benjamites were in the north.
Benjamin and Judah were both together, and the other kingdom, the other ones were around the rest of the land. So here as well, we have the traveling sanctuary was in the portion of Joseph, and then the permanent one was in Judah, the fixed one. And of course, a little bit later on in history, there's actually a split of kingdoms. there's two Jewish kingdoms for much of Jewish history. One of them's leader is from Judah, and the other one's leader is from Joseph. Okay, that's Jewish history in a nutshell. Now, what we're going to say here is, what was the initial argument? As follows. Judah and his brothers, but Judah being the leader of them, saw Judaism as this continuation from Abraham's generation and Isaac's generation. They were going to be the next generation of it. What did they do for a living? The brothers?
They're shepherds.
They were shepherds. Okay. Now, shepherding. Anyone ever do any shepherding in free time?
Yeah.
I would imagine, and this is what Jewish mysticism says, if you want to be like a spiritual person, like meditate, it's not a bad profession. Hal, do you see yourself meditating in the field while taking care of your sheep?
Absolutely.
So maybe next week's meditation class can happen in the field. If you're going to be, springtime. It's a very conducive profession. You have time alone. You have time in nature. You have time to be spiritual. You do one task. You do it well. I'm not saying it's easy, but at least it's one task and it's in seclusion. Okay.
You let the dog do it.
Well, you have the dog do it. They saw Yiddishkeit, Judaism, as a very particular belief system where we stick to ourselves, we stick to our traditions, we don't engage, we don't assimilate, we don't get involved in worldly stuff because that will water us down and lose who we are. And shepherding is the perfect profession for that. You're insulated, whether it's a physical wall or like a ghetto, or a conceptual wall where there's my world and there's that world. We will stay in the hills of Canaan or Israel in those days. We'll be able to serve God with this tranquil state of existence. We won't lose who we are in the process. Yosef, however, was more of a universalist, okay? Judaism is great, monotheism is great, but this isn't just for us. We don't have to this is to share, to be a light amongst the nations, to share this with the world, to go out there. Let's do text 7, and then we'll discuss this more. Pam, I want to hear your comment text 7, after we do text 7. Where are we up to? Jen.
The patriarchs were shepherds, as Joseph's brothers said to Pharaoh, "Your servants are shepherds, both we and our forefathers." The reason why the patriarchs chose to be shepherds is because they wished to be removed and distanced from the bustle of the city, to be able to engage in divine service without any bother at all. Joseph was not a shepherd, quite the opposite. Joseph was second in command to Pharaoh, who ruled the superpower of the entire world, to the extent that Joseph ruled over the land and provided for all its inhabitants. It is here where Joseph's unique quality comes to light. Though he was engaged with worldly matters, as opposed to the patriarchs who were shepherds, he still maintained a lofty spiritual level and a complete commitment to God.
And even when he was with the brothers, his eyes was always on leadership. Right? What if he was dreaming about being a macher? He was dreaming about getting engaged in the world. Okay? And the brothers no, you got the wrong family for that. That's not what we are about. We are about praying to God, serving God in our manner without engaging. And by you having this relationship with the world, that is ultimately going to lose who you are. And they saw at this critical juncture in history, he's an outcast. He needs to be dealt with. Okay. And by the way, we say that's what makes Joseph so tremendous. Later in the story, Joseph maintains his righteousness even while being a politician. That's hard. Right? So you can't imagine being in politics, being the second in command in Egypt, which was known to be a immoral country, and still maintain his righteousness, but that was his vision all along. That's difficult. Pam, you wanted to say something, then Janice.
I want to ask something. I don't understand why some areas of Hasidic or Hasidism, they say you're not supposed to listen to the news, you're not supposed to, watch TV and do all these things, and that's a form of disengagement from the world. And the other thing that and following on this thought is so we're commanded to fix our souls, to come our own. We're here to fix ourselves and contribute to fixing the world. Correct. To come along. So how are you going to do that if you don't want to know about other people's problems? You don't want to know what goes on in the world. You totally isolate yourself from all the news and from all the injustice and from all the stuff that goes on in the world.
So this debate is an ongoing debate in Judaism. This debate is not something that we finish solving. This is there up until today. Now, the majority of Jews, but then you can shift into saving the world and not being involved. You can lose who you are.
But that's the challenge.
That's
That's
why it's
the
a debate.
whole-
That's
but-
why it's a debate.
but-
That's the challenge. And
But
you can go,
I
yeah.
don't-
Disengaging is refusing the challenge.
Oh, I see
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Correct.
Because how can you then fix yourself, fix your soul, correct your soul if you're not out there being challenged
Correct.
and having to actually rise up to the occasion to correct your soul, correct our character flaws, and at the same time help people.
So that you're a Joseph. That's a Joseph. But you're right. That is, the Torah says that we have a mission to the entire world.
Yeah.
And our goal is not to be a Noach, not to be a live in a bubble, as we've discussed in numerous classes before. But we are supposed to change the world for the better through spreading universal Jewish values, not preaching Judaism where we don't have to convert anyone, but there are universal values of Yiddishkeit that are for everyone, and we're supposed to be spreading that to people. So this was shepherds, this was Joseph, and there's a beautiful spin. And someone else had Janice,
I
yeah.
just had a quick question. The Egyptians, terrible anti-Semites, enslaved everything, yet they made the second in command to Pharaoh a Jew?
He didn't know he was a Jew.
He didn't
Oh,
know.
they didn't
And
know.
and this is, by the way, it does say he was a Hebrew.
Yeah.
In next week's Torah portion, Joseph's actually in prison. The butler introduces Joseph as a Hebrew slave.
Well, maybe the answer here is it was a time of need, and he became second in command through merit.
Right.
Because he demonstrated to the Pharaoh that he was the man to make a difference, and Pharaoh recognized he needed help.
And it was later, when the Jews became more numerous, that fear crept in, right? Now
Well, it's a
they're
new
going
Pharaoh, too.
new Pharaoh, Jews are going to take over. The fear, I guess the anti-Semitism came to the forefront at a latter point in time. At this point, either it wasn't there or they needed it, as you said, they needed it. And they put aside their anti-Semitic feelings in order to, sometimes in history they didn't even do that. It's so bad, I'd rather shoot myself than to give a Jew honor, right? There's that as well. But yeah.
Kind of like in Spain. Same thing in Spain with.
For a period of time in Spain, the Jews contributed greatly, the golden era, greatly to society. They were in positions of honor. And then
was
correct.
in charge of all money.
Correct.
And there was an inquisition anyway.
So I love this. I've never seen this interpretation. This is from Rav Avram Kook, who was the first rabbi of the modern state of Israel. When Joseph meets his father for the first time, they hug, they kiss. We have the reunion after 20 or so years. And the first thing Joseph says is, Samani Elokim la'adona kol Mitzrayim. God has placed me as a macher, as a master over all of Egypt. It sounds like the Jewish kid that goes to his mother and says, don't worry, I became a doctor, I became someone. That's the first thing he tells Yaakov. God made me a master over all of Egypt. Look at the way Rav Kook. Samani Elokim la'adona kol Mitzrayim. God placed me a master over all of Egypt. Or you could read it this way. And text 8. This is
Joseph said, God has placed me as a lord over all of Egypt. The explanation of this is, now, as a result of my efforts, God is recognized as Lord over all of Egypt.
I have made God master over all of Egypt. In Hebrew, the word Samani Elokim, either God has placed me or I have placed God as master over Egypt. In other words, I've used my influence for the better. I became a leader in Egypt, and as a result, I have raised the standard of the values and belief in God. So that's what Yosef is saying. Dad, the same Yosef that I used to be, I am now, and I'm using my position of influence for the better. It hasn't gotten to me, I've gotten to it. So that is what Yosef represents. The rest of the brothers, less so. The rest of the brothers saw that as a very dangerous road to follow. Because once you are in positions of leadership, you're going to have to be a populist. You're going to have to, get everyone behind you. And slowly but surely, you're going to assimilate. And you're going to water down your own values in the process. This, according to mysticism, and whether on the literal level, certainly on the spiritual level, was what was between the Joseph vision of Judaism and the Judah vision of Judaism. So here is the new spin on the way Rav Kook actually says this.
Rabbi.
Well, let me just finish. You want to? Okay, you can ask. Yeah.
No, I was going to ask something completely different, so maybe afterwards I can ask.
Sure.
My question, not for
About
now,
the Hasidim?
right? No, my question is, where was Rachel in all of that?
Rachel had passed away.
When did she pass away again?
Rachel passed away while giving birth to Benjamin.
Oh.
She passed away in labor, actually.
So, but how old was?
He was 17. So
She did not. Yosef.
When
Oh, how old was Yosef when his mother passed away? What is the age difference between Joseph and Benjamin? That would really be our question, because
But no, my concern was, so she was not alive when he was sold into. Okay, gotcha.
she was not alive.
Okay.
She passed away young. Yeah. Good question. So he says, when Judah saw this going on, the brothers wanted to kill Joseph. They felt this vision again was not in line for Judaism, was going to water down Judaism. We're going to be just like every other people. And Joseph says, you want to kill him? Why do that? What profit is in that? Let's test him. Let's have a way of seeing whether or not his method works or not. At least there'll be something to gain from this. Sell him away. Put him amongst the nations. Let him have an opportunity to try to influence other people. Then we'll be able to see where that vision goes. But what profit? This is the way Rav Kook reads this text 10, Brian.
Judah justifiably believed that Joseph's path was a threat to the survival of the Jewish people. The brothers therefore sought a way to rid themselves of Joseph. Thus, Simon and Levi, who were the first to stand up and risk their lives for the integrity of the Jewish nation, the ones who fought against assimilation among the nations, in the story with their sister Dinah, suggested that they killed the dreamer Joseph. However, Judah countered, what profit is there if we slay our brother and cover up his blood? If it is God's will that the pathway of Joseph prevail, what gain will there be if we kill him? Surely it won't quell God's desire that the ideology of Joseph be carried through. Thus Judah said, come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. Let Joseph become assimilated among the nations, and we will see what his behavior will bring. Now, I have a question here.
Yeah.
Most of this text here with Judah speaking is quoted.
Well, the what profit is there if we slay our brother and cover his blood is, the quote should end there.
But the
The literal text ends there in the
Okay.
Torah. He's then giving his spin on what Judah was saying, but
By
that's
Midrash.
not from the Torah.
right.
No, that's Rab Kook's interpretation
Okay.
of it, but it is based upon this Hasidic idea of the difference in vision between Judah and that. So that is the way he reads this. So this is an age-old Jewish debate, yes?
Text 9 just says Ephraim mingles with the people. Ephraim was as a cake which was not turned over. Does that mean half baked?
I didn't understand. I did not understand that text, honestly. I think it mingles is Ephraim is Joseph's son. It's saying Joseph is a mingler. He's a schmoozer. He mixes amongst the people. I did not understand the second half of that verse. That's why I skipped it. Thank you for covering up my ignorance. I don't know what it means.
Half-baked is good.
Can you repeat the text?
There's a text in Hosea 7:8 that says Ephraim mingles with the people. Ephraim was as a cake which was not turned over. I don't know what it means as a cake. The word in Hebrew is a uga. Uga means a cake. Beli hafucha, which was not turned over. Perhaps it means it did not get turned over in the sense he did not lose himself. But why the cake?
Unfinished.
Incomplete.
Right.
unfinished.
Oh, that's what it means.
Half baked.
All right, I don't know.
You're
Someone needs to-
you're asking why the use of the word cage?
What is the meaning of a cake that was not turned over? I have to see the context.
Spelled
Hosea. 7-8.
C-A-G-E or C-A-K-E?
K-E. And if you want to
Oh,
look it up,
a cake.
Debbie, it's Hosea 7-8. A cake, an uga that was not turned over.
Meanwhile, maybe we should move on.
We should move on because we have just 3-4 minutes. Let us now, so this debate really was throughout much of history, and the pendulum always swung in different directions between us being a very individual nation, serving God in our way, versus a time when we were more universalists. What was the one time in Jewish history where this was many times it happened time and time in history, you know, they talk about the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, but one of the first times where we really had the opportunity to assimilate all the way was, much earlier? Greece. The Greeks. Hellenism. See, the Greeks appreciated our ethics, our wisdom, our culture. And they said, hey, those are all good things. Hold on to that. But take that and bring it to everyone else and become like everyone else. Take away your belief system. Take away the mitzvot they really couldn't stand, by the way, were mitzvot that didn't have a rational explanation to it. Faith-based mitzvot. Ethics, we can appreciate that. Even nice culture, they appreciate the intelligence of the Jewish people. What they could not take is those things that are faith-based, that makes us a particular people, that stand out, that makes us different. And the circumcision, absolutely, especially because in Greece, they put a big emphasis on the human body, right? The gymnasiums. It says that they built right next to the temple a gymnasium. A gymnasium in those days wasn't just a gym. It was an academy. It was a place where everyone would just become the same. They wanted to Hellenize Judaism. That was the goal. And interestingly enough, who stood up against that? Which tribe? And we're running out of time here, so I'll paraphrase the end of the class. Who were the Maccabees from? They were actually from not even a Judah, but who was the one that wanted Levites? They were Levites. The same ones that stood against the golden calf, and they were the same ones that destroyed the city of Shechem as passionate. This is not Judaism. Absolutely not. This can't be. If we become like the Greeks within a century or two, there will be no more Judaism. All there will be is Greeks will be swallowed up in them. Yeah, they like certain parts of Judaism, but if you water down Judaism to a place where we don't have a belief system, that doesn't work. And the Greeks then said, no, this is the Jewish mission, right? Light amongst the nations. So this is the deeper meaning now. What animal is Joseph compared to in the Torah? Both in Jacob blessing Joseph, as well as Moses blessing Joseph at the end of his life. So 12a and 12b actually are the two texts. I'll paraphrase them. When Jacob was about to pass away, he blessed most of his children, but he cursed Shimon and Levi. And he says, my soul shouldn't be in their council. My honor shouldn't be in their assembly. In their wrath, they killed or tried to kill a man. With their will, they uprooted an ox. An ox is a reference to Joseph. Joseph. And then again, later at the end of Moses' life, he compares the Jewish people to an ox. That is, every single animal had their flag, you ever see the flags? 12 tribes, each had like an animal. Judah was a lion. Judah was a lion. Yosef was an ox.
Is that what Re'im are?
Right, yeah. So the spiritual meaning of right on the horn of an ox is, hey, this is nothing new. This is the Joseph vision of the world. The Joseph vision of the world is that universalists. You are a people that, yeah, you had your belief structure, but become like everyone else. Take it public. We say, that's not Joseph. Joseph was, yes, we go public. Yes, we influence the world, but we don't lose ourselves in the process. And that has been the Jewish struggle for all of time. How can you engage without losing yourself? My brother's a marketer, marketing for a company called Blinds.com. and they were bought out a year ago by Home Depot. So he was actually asked recently he was leading a certain business meeting of small businesses that were bought out. And the question was, how can you keep your identity and your culture? Because Blinds.com has, ever hear them advertise, they have a unique, once they're part of this, huge Home Depot. And it was interesting that he gave a whole presentation in the business world using a lot of Torah metaphors for this idea. And part of it is how the Jewish people can be, again, giving and influencing, but without losing who you are. And he gave a few metaphors, but one of the ones that Torah actually gives is oil. We're about to have the story of Hanukkah. And oil has a few interesting properties. On one hand, oil, right, it doesn't mix. It doesn't mix. And you can mix it with water and it's float to the top. It's incredible. At the same time, however, Torah says oil has another property, and that is, I know, when I spill a chicken soup on me, it's not good. Why? Because the stain it saturates, it permeates, it doesn't just stay on the... So which one is it? Does it stay to the top or does it infuse itself wherever it goes? Which one is it?
Both.
How can it be both? It is both. That somehow is the Jewish mission. And we struggle with this. We have to keep our own identity, keep our own mitzvahs, keep our own belief system. At the same time, we have to affect and inspire and engage and not run away from the world. And that is Yosef done correctly, not the Hellenist version of Yosef, but also not the Judah shepherd, but it's somewhere in the middle. And ultimately, that path, we have to do it successfully, and that is the Jewish mission and vision. All right, we'll hold it over here. Any other questions?
Oil also burns, so we've got to burn with passion.
Correct.
And I think that's where we can miss the mark if we don't.
Right, so if the passion's not there, also has a lot of calories, we got to... Hanukkah. A very happy Hanukkah, everyone.
Rabbi,
Any other comments from online community?
Debbie?
Oh, just thank you very much. And I posted some little notes. I just said the ox is a stiff-necked animal.
Oh.
And that's what the Jewish people are called, stiff-necked. They're put in there and it's hard to move them.
Correct.
Probably more so than the donkey, because an ox is huge, weighs a lot, and yet it does an incredible amount of work. And when it hoes the soil, it will dig very, very deep into the soil.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And by the way, even in Hanukkah itself, on one hand, it's a holiday that represents Judaism staying traditionalist, right? With tradition and not being Hellenized. On the other hand, we celebrate it by a menorah that is facing outside or public. So even within Hanukkah, on one hand, the whole holiday is celebrating a specific Jewish nation that didn't assimilate, and yet the menorah, it says, is supposed to be in a public display. So there also we have that idea. All right, thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Rabbi, the basic difference between Hellenism
Yeah.
and Judaism, the very core difference was that
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Your Healthy Pet with Gisela DiCarlo. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.